minute past 8 on LBC. With me on the panel today, to my left, Dr. Shola Mos-Shogbamimu. In fact, to everybody's left. She is a lawyer, political activist and author of the book This Is Why I Resist, Don't Define My Black Identity. Next to her, on my extreme left, David Davis, Conservative, said no one ever, Conservative MP for Haltemprice and Howden and former Brexit Secretary. To my right, Noa Hoffman, political reporter for The Sun, and next to her, Salmond, leader of the Alba Party and former First Minister of Scotland and former leader of the SNP. The number to call, 0345 6060 973. You can text 84850, or you can say, Alexa, send a comment to LBC. And don't forget to watch us on Global Player.
Call 0345 6060 973. Tweet at LBC. Text 84850. Cross question with Iain Dale. This is LBC.
First text of the evening from Sid. Dr. Shola rocks. Now you're talking. Well, we've got an hour to see if that's true or not, haven't we? Let's go to our first...
The rest of us didn't organise our fan club.
Let's go to our first question. OK, we've got chaos already in the studio. I knew that would happen. Let's go to Sean in concert for our first question. Hello, Sean.
Hello, Iain. Hello, panel. As Keir Starmer, is he? I cannot stand him any longer. Like, has he got the right to kick somebody out of the party for 40 years service?
Well, that's not the reason he's been kicked out, obviously, but we get your drift there. Noa Hoffman, can you just explain the background to this? We talked a lot about Jeremy Corbyn and Keir Starmer on the show last night. Just for our listeners now, just give a little bit of the background.
Yeah, so today the Labour Party formalised blocking him from standing for his Islington North constituency as a Labour MP. So Keir Starmer put forward a motion that was then put forward to Labour's ruling council, the National Executive Committee, and Keir and his allies have a majority on that committee, and they voted to block Jeremy from standing as a Labour candidate at the next election. He's not banned from being a Labour member, but he won't be able to stand as a Labour candidate.
Now, you're a reporter as opposed to a commentator, but can you offer an opinion on whether that was the right thing for Keir Starmer to do?
So this is quite emotionally draining for me because I am Jewish, and the 2019 general election was very painful. I was in university, sitting in the library, watching Luciana Berger be hounded out of the party by virtue of being a Jew, while people around me were celebrating this man as the pinnacle of anti-racism. Sorry, it's hard not to get upset. So I think that Keir Starmer, by blocking Corbyn, has done the bare minimum. He said he wants to do more. He wants to get rid of the hard left, the cranks, out of the Labour Party. And that's something I think is great for him, maybe less so for the Tories, but great for the UK in general. So for me, as a Jewish person, this is the bare minimum. And I would like to see him go a lot further, as he's promised, and ban all people who have strayed into the territory of anti-Jewish racism from having anything to do with the Labour Party.
Very strong words there. Of course, Keir Starmer described Jeremy Corbyn as his friend not so long ago, and he's still being allowed to stay as a Labour Party member.
And he campaigned for him to be the Prime Minister only 3 years ago.
This is true, but when you say you want him to go further, do you mean chuck him out of the Labour Party altogether?
I mean, that's not for me. What I want Keir Starmer to do, and what, in fairness, he has promised many times to do, and what he's been commended by the likes of the Board of Deputies, British Jews, for doing, is promising a zero-tolerance approach to anti-Semitism, which, of course, should be applied to all forms of racism. But, let's be clear here. Under Corbyn, it was anti-Jewish racism that was the main issue. It was hurting people like my friends' families. British Jews were thinking, am I going to have to pack up and leave? We have this sort of inherited trauma from family members who have died, whether that's in the Holocaust, whether that's in the pogroms in Russia. When we get the tiniest bit of fear, we do not have the privilege to think, benefit of the doubt, and people did give him the benefit of the doubt, and he proved time and time again that he did not take anti-Jewish racism seriously. So, banning him, I think this is a great start. I think that's an issue for Keir Starmer, but what I would like to see him do is completely rid his party of anti-Semites.
When I asked you the question saying you're not a commentator, as soon as I asked the question, I thought, oh, that's really unfair. I shouldn't have done that. But I'm glad I did after that answer. Alex Salmond.
Well, I mean, I've got every respect for Noah's feelings, and I'm obviously not Jewish, but I'm a former member of the Committee of the Holocaust Memorial Commission. So I don't think I'm likely to be accused of anti-Semitism anytime soon. And in my opinion, Jeremy Corbyn, who I've known, 35 years, is not an anti-Semite. He may be a very bad leader, and he may not have controlled the factions and elements in his party. But I've never...
But he tolerated it, that's the problem, isn't it?
Well, they're not, but I mean, you're talking here about Keir Starmer, who was quite happy to campaign for Jeremy Corbyn at the last general election, who sat in a Labour shadow cabinet at that time. So I don't see how he can possibly now say, I now find that someone who I sat with, campaigned to be Prime Minister, was actually all along an anti-Semite when I was campaigning with him. And
I don't think, to be fair, I don't think he's saying that he's an anti-Semite.
Well, I was just coming to that. And then if he's not saying he's an anti-Semite, which Noah obviously doesn't agree with him, then why is he trying to ban him to be a Labour candidate? Well, I'll give you an explanation, which has got nothing to do with racism or anti-Semitism. Keir Starmer believes that by banning Jeremy Corbyn, he's going to get brownie points with Middle England. This will demonstrate what a tough leader he is and all the rest of it. I just think that's a pathetic reason for banning somebody from standing for Parliament. I think his motives in doing so are entirely dishonourable. And I don't think he'll succeed incidentally, because I don't actually think that the saloon bars of Surrey are full of people who get up in the morning saying, yes, I'm going to vote Labour as long as they ban Jeremy Corbyn from standing in Islington. I think he's miscalculating. I think he's doing it for the wrong motives. And with great respect for Noah's feelings on the matter, in my estimation, over the 35 years I've known him, I don't think that Jeremy Corbyn is an anti-Semite.
Well, we should make clear that Keir Starmer's position is that he's not allowing him to stand as a candidate because he didn't respond in an apologetic way to the findings of the Equalities and Human Rights Commission report. That's at the centre of this.
And he's not popular. He's anti-NATO. His views don't align with the views of the majority of the
But that doesn't mean he should be sort of expelled from the Labour Party.
Can I quickly add,
Shola,
if you don't mind? I think Keir Starmer is wrong. I think he's absolutely wrong. And the basis, the ground on which he sought to ban Jeremy Corbyn does not include anti-Semitism at all. He doesn't mention, because that would not stand in any court of law as far as I'm concerned. They would not have enough evidence to be able to back that up. And I totally hear what Noah is saying, because in my mind, during that 2019 elections, Jeremy Corbyn's weakness in handling anti-Semitism really annoyed me, because I thought to myself, first of all, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired of the infighting in the Labour Party. And I'm not even a member. I'm like, you people are making so much noise. I need a party that I can go, yeah, please stand against that party. But all they just kept doing was in there. And then you had this whole anti-Semitism, the crisis. And I just did not see Jeremy Corbyn coming out and fighting it as he should. But again, that is not a reason that he put forward, that Keir Starmer put forward for banning him. I do think that Keir Starmer has banned Jeremy Corbyn for politically convenient reasons, not to stand up for the Jewish community. That's not what I'm saying. And let me tell you this, I'm not someone who used to follow Keir Starmer, but since he became leader, I've been paying attention to what he's doing. And now I'm deeply concerned about promises he made when he was running for leadership that he is not kept. He gave people one impression, and the moment he's leader, he seems to be doing something else. So that makes me question, I'm sorry, who the heck are you? Because I'm not going to vote for you simply because I don't want the Tory party to be leader. I'll go look for somebody else if I have to. So I don't think it's right.
Ed Davey will welcome you with open arms.
I don't think it's right. I think it should have been left to the constituents of Islington North.
But to be fair, I mean, all parties have approved lists of candidates. They're all centrally approved. This is not unusual. The Labour Party has the power to say, well, no.
It is unusual because the basis upon which he's given for kicking out Jeremy Corbyn is the same basis that should have been used for kicking out Ed Miliband or Harold Wilson or anybody else that used to lead the party, but they failed at the elections.
No, but the reason was, the public reason that Keir Starmer was given was because he wouldn't accept the conclusions of the Equality and Human Rights
But even that wasn't
Commission.
true, because he did not deny the findings. I think the thing, and my understanding of the controversial bit in his response, and can I just say, I honestly thought Jeremy Corbyn should have just shut the heck up when the report came out. Be quiet, right? Yeah, okay. But the point is, what Jeremy Corbyn said was that the media, I think he alluded to the media, he used the word exaggerating part of it. Now, we know that anti-Semitism in the Labour Party was not a smear. It was real. It was the reality for a lot of Jewish people in the party. But at the same time, two things can be true. There was an orchestrated campaign, media-wise, with everything, including anti-Semitism, not just anti-Semitism, being thrown at Jeremy Corbyn. I thought that's what he was referring to.
David Davis.
Well, I can see both Alex and Noah's point of view. I mean, the first time I came across this. I mean, I'd known Jeremy Corbyn for a long time, like Alex, and I never thought of him as an anti-Semite. And then I went to spend some time with a couple of friends, both Jewish, and they were natural Labour voters in trauma about what was going on. It was the first time I'd ever realised this. I just didn't know. But I do think Starmer's going to have a real problem explaining why he was willing to campaign for this man to be Prime Minister, not just a member of his party, not just a backbencher, but to be Prime Minister. And yet he's now, and nothing about him has changed in the meantime, and yet now he's not.
Well, Jeremy Corbyn hasn't changed since 1983.
No. 1883. Sure. That's roughly where his politics go back to. But the simple truth is, it strikes me as a piece of sort of machine politics rather than act of principle, and that's, I think, how the public will see it.
And I mean, you do know him well. I think you worked with him on one or two issues.
I took him to America to meet John McCain and get the last Brit out of Guantanamo Bay. Yeah, absolutely. So I know him well enough, and I've never ever seen this. But as I said, I then went and spent Christmas with a couple of Jewish friends, and they were horrified, and I was surprised.
Spent Christmas with Jewish friends.
Well, it was actually a Boxing Day, to be absolutely clear. Dear me, what a pedant.
Right, well...
Probably a different day in North.
A very interesting subject, Sean. Thanks for bringing it up. We'll move on to another question in a moment from our friend Ulf in Hamburg. It's 8:15.
LBC
I'm really not sure whether I'm going to be in a fit state to present the last hour of the programme tonight, given the panel that we have. You should have heard the discussion in the break. Alex Salmond, David Davis, Dr. Shola Mos-Shogbamimu is here, and Noa Hoffman, political reporter for The Sun. Let's go to Ulf in Hamburg. Ulf, what would you like to ask?
Good evening, panel. Good Abend, Ian. Well, is it thinkable that voters in Scotland will now prefer to wait for the United Kingdom to get closer to the single market and the customs union, maybe even rejoin, rather than take a gamble with an independent Scotland joining the EU at some later date? In other words, will the failure of Brexit lead to the failure of the independence movement? And let me preempt one thing. Especially for Mr. Davis, if you think Brexit Britain looks like a success from the outside, you've got a thing coming.
Okay, Alex Salmond, let's start with you.
The caller is absolutely right. And David Davis and his colleagues totally led the country astray. There's no doubt about that whatsoever. And Brexit's been a mighty catastrophe.
Huge success.
In terms of any measurable thing. But on the Scottish dimension, which the caller mentioned, it's quite interesting. Some people have argued that the going out of the European Union made independence for Scotland more difficult, because previous to that, Scotland and England could have been partners within the wider Europe. And therefore there was all sorts of issues about borders and customs posts and the rest of it. But then, of course, we've just had the Windsor House Agreement going through Parliament at the present moment and widely supported, which of course has a situation where Northern Ireland has full access to the single market and a preferential trading arrangement with the rest of the UK, which you could just about approximate for where Scotland could be as an independent country, perhaps as part of the European Free Trade Association. So while the caller is right to postulate the issues in British politics have influences in the campaign for Scottish independence, if one of these right now is the Windsor House Agreement. Now, I don't think Rishi Sunak had in mind, when he was extolling the virtues of this agreement and saying how wonderful preferential position for Northern Ireland would have, he wasn't really thinking about the Scottish dimension. But perhaps he could have, because I haven't been to think the Prime Minister's actually a secret supporter of Scottish independence, and he's trying to pave the way for a logical, which our caller would agree with, which would be rather a good idea to be in the single market. I think it would be a good idea for Scotland. I think it would be a good idea for England as well. But if England is showing no sign of getting there, either under Rishi Sunak or under Sir Keir Starmer, it might be a good idea for Scotland to get there as quickly as possible.
David Davis.
Well, to be fair to Alex, in his little fantasy he's just been giving you here.
It's a big fantasy.
He's a big fantasy. He did actually suggest this to me right back at the beginning of the Brexit process. I mean, it's nice to get advice from Germany, always. But the simple truth is that what's happening in Scotland is the support for independence, which was at its highest under Alex, is now dropping. And is dropping because of what's been the shenanigans been going on the last year.
Fair, and Alex won't like this, but it was actually higher under Nicola Sturgeon than it ever was under Alex.
Well, it's still dropping, and it's dropping under her lookalike successor, I'm afraid.
Her lookalike successor?
She's continuity Sturgeon.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah.
Couldn't really follow that one. Shola?
I do not think that Scotland should hang around waiting to see whether or not England wakes the heck up from the failure, the utter disaster that is Brexit, that somebody to my left helped bring the country into. I think Scotland should use the sense that God gave it and recognize where its own, economic success and possibility can come from. And
85% of its trade is within England, not the EU.
Well, maybe if it spreads its branches. All I'm saying is, don't think that all your bread is buttered just in England. We don't have to.
85%.
Sorry, I should say the rest of the UK, not just England.
The point here is that the caller has asked whether or not Scotland should wait to see if the UK is going to rejoin the EU. That's not happening in a long time. Now, I want us to wake the heck up and get back into the EU. But even I know that's not going to happen for long. As long as we continue to have people gaslight the nation with lies about Brexit, and then we end up we keep arguing about Brexit rather than just focusing on the disaster that Brexit is, which is what we're all experiencing. So no, I don't think Scotland should wait around for England.
I would just echo David's point, and I agree with Shola on the point that the UK is not running back to the EU anytime soon. I'm not even sure if it would in my lifetime. But I think in Scotland, as David said, the polls are showing that independence is becoming less and less popular, partly because the SNP government has a pretty poor record, whether it's on the NHS, whether it's on drug abuse or education. And leaving the UK with the SNP government, I think people are thinking, how is that going to be any better? Also, we're in a cost of living crisis. We have soaring inflation. People's priorities at the moment are household finances, how do I pay for energy bills? How do I pay for the weekly shop? Not, all the chaos that's very likely to erupt if there's this big constitutional crisis.
Alex?
Well, I was just going to correct one of your statistics. The 85...
Only one?
I could correct quite a few, but I'll start with
We told you won't make the end of the programme.
85% of Scotland's trade is with England. No. Much of Scotland's trade with Europe and the rest of the world goes through English ports. That's not the same thing as the destination of the trade being in England. And the simple way to deal with that is do what Ireland's doing at the present moment, is that's to have your own direct ports to the European market. But
you already do. You have fourth ports and Port of Glasgow, Aberdeen.
But not nearly enough. I mean, in terms of the access to the marketplace, the bulk of Scotland's trade to the single market goes through the Channel ports. That's just a fact at the present moment, and that's not as it should be.
We can unclog the M6.
The vast majority of the trade is with England. I mean, the rest of the UK.
But I was disputing the 85% figure at that point.
I didn't make it up.
Noah made a really, beg your pardon. Noah made a really interesting point about the cost of living crisis. People should. Well, isn't there a possibility that the issue of independence might relate to the cost of living crisis, in particular to energy costs? I mean, Scotland's a country where almost 100%, more than 100%, if you take it in gross figures, of its electricity comes from renewable sources. And yet the price of that electricity has increased dramatically over the last 2 years. Now, given that the price of wind and the price of water hasn't increased, why on earth should Scotland's electricity prices be increasing? Well, the answer is because the regulatory body Ofgem rather, regulates on the international price of gas, despite the fact that Scotland produces none of its electricity.
To be honest, Ofcom might as well regulate it, because they do a damn sight better job.
Absolutely. Well, I've voiced a lot, but it's just an example of how some people might look at the cost of living crisis in Scotland and say, yeah, that's an argument for Scottish independence.
Ulf, I think you got your money's worth there. Thank you very much indeed. Let's have a follow-up text question from Margaret in Gurrock, who says, what chance does Humza Yousaf have of increasing the chances of independence if Nicola Sturgeon couldn't build upon the levels of support handed to her by Alex Salmond? Very briefly, from the rest of you on this, and we'll give Alex a little bit more time. Noah?
I don't think a very strong chance. I agree with David that Humza is continuity Sturgeon candidate. Nicola Sturgeon's policies and her personal popularity plummeted towards the end of her leadership. He is trying to follow her path on the Gender Recognition Act, which is quite unpopular and very controversial, and he's ready to go to war with Westminster on this issue as well. This is not what people are really worried about. As I said before, they're worried about cost of living crisis.
David?
Alex's heroic efforts to turn the cost of living crisis into an independence issue, notwithstanding, I think people will be focusing on other things, whether it's healthcare, cost of living, or whatever, not on independence.
Shola?
I don't know what his chance is. I would say that I'm happy to wait and see whether or not you want to call him continuity Nicola Sturgeon or if he's different. But what I will say is that I think it's important for people to recognise what the Scottish people want is probably evolving. And I don't agree with the statement that that Nicola Sturgeon did not increase what was handed to her by Alex, because I think she was a very effective leader. If anything, I paid more attention to the politics over in Scotland because of her. No offense, Alex, but I thought she was I thought she was very effective that way, and that's how I got to know a whole lot more, and I was able to follow it. So I'm going to wait and see about Hamza.
I think she was a better politician than she was a First Minister, bluntly.
Agreed.
When I interviewed Nicola Sturgeon at Edinburgh last year, I asked her if she would ever want to sort of repair her relationship with you, Alex, and she just said, nope. Now that she's not First Minister any longer, would you, I mean, because look, she was your protege, very good friend of yours. Is there not part of you that would love to sort of repair that relationship?
Yeah, well, absolutely. But it doesn't look like it's happening anytime soon, Ian, so we'll just have to make the best of where we are. And talk about, the position of Scotland, which Nicola Sturgeon and I have jointly shared through all our political lives. I think that the key problem, I mean, the fair assessment of Nicola in independence, she didn't move the dial in independence. I mean, it was 45% in 2014, it's 46% in the latest poll. So the dial didn't move.
But it did go up to 55 at one point.
Indeed, but that's not the point. The point is where it averages out. Even let's say it's 50-50 at the present moment. Given Brexit, I've lost count. How many Tory Prime Ministers have there been since 2014? There's been quite a few anyway.
The old jokes are the best, aren't they?
And there's been Boris Johnson, who been them all. So there's been plenty of things that you might believe would have increased the support for Scottish independence.
Hamza Yousaf, though, is he likely to increase the chances of independence?
Then I want to agree with something that Noah said here. The biggest difficulty that I see, two difficulties. One is that the SNP government had an extremely hard-won reputation for competence. Back in 2014, whatever people said about independence,
we're talking history now.
Nobody suggested that the SNP government weren't anything other than competent. I mean, it'd be refreshing if somebody ever said that about a Westminster Tory government, but nonetheless, that was the case. They lost that over the last couple of years, and they partly lost it by going into issues like self-identification. And I think they also strayed away from self-determination. My criticism of Nicola Sturgeon is not that she spent all her time talking about independence.
You've avoided answering Margaret's question about Hamza Yousaf. You gave him his first job, but you're not a fan, are you?
No, that's not fair. Not just his first job in government. I gave him his first job. He worked for me in my constituency office, and Hamza is a good, competent politician. But if he's going to succeed where Nicola failed, then he has to address that problem of the perception of lack of competence in the Scottish government, because it's only through that competence that people get confidence to move to.
But everything from healthcare to education to ferries.
We can't go through all those issues. Damien in Ladbroke Grove says, should Kate Forbes and Ash Regan join the Alba Party?
Well, I would always delighted to have, but we've had quite a few new members over the last 24 hours, it should be said. But we're always delighted to have members. But I think people should be allowed to see what happens in their own party before they make.
Why would they want to join a party that had as a candidate somebody called Andy Arthur, apparently a world boxing champion, who describes Hamza Yousaf as Scottish as England? I don't want foreign people running the country that my ancestors bled for.
Yeah, but Ian, this is one of the trouble with picking up stuff, if I may say so, from the Sun paper. Firstly, Alec was a boxing champion. Alec Arthur, who's a boxing champion, is not a member of Alba and hasn't been a member.
He was a candidate.
Yeah, which is 2 years ago. But the point is, if you look at his tweets, what he was trying to do, and I think rather ineptly, was mimic a speech that Hamza had made in the Scottish Parliament, and Hamza made what might have been an ill-advised speech where he went through a number of positions in Scottish society and saying that they're all occupied by white people, and he was trying to demonstrate that that's not quite the case. Now, I wouldn't have done it. I think it's a very stupid thing to do. I actually think the fact that Scotland has the first Muslim leader in the Western world is an excellent thing. And stands as a testament for the diversity of Scottish society.
That wasn't
Alec Arthur won't be standing for your party.
No, he's not standing for the party. He's not a member.
Well, he was a candidate.
Yeah, but I can't discipline people who are not in my party, Ian. Not even the most vehement of journalists would say. So I deprecate any racist statements, as I've always done. But just, the chair of the Alba Party is the most prominent Muslim politician in Scotland, Tasmin Ahmed Sheikh. So the suggestion, if you're trying to make it, which I'm sure you're
I think
not,
the second most prominent Muslim politician in Scotland.
After you.
who would be the first? No,
Hamza.
Female.
Hamza.
Sorry,
Hamza.
woman.
I didn't
Muslim
hear the word
politician.
female being used.
I mean, I know self-identification only goes so far in politics here. Come on.
Right, on that happy note, let's move on. It's 8:32 on LBC. Let's get the news headlines from Daryl Jackson.
Ahead of a visit from US President Joe Biden next month, MI5 has raised a terror threat level in Northern Ireland from substantial to severe. There's been some dissident Republican activity, and the 25th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement is approaching. One of the candidates to replace Nicola Sturgeon as leader of the SNP, Kate Forbes, is returning to the backbenches. The winning candidate, Humza Yousaf, offered her the role of Rural Affairs Secretary, but she turned it down. And Jeremy Corbyn has been banned by Labour's ruling body from standing as one of its candidates at the next election. It follows his suspension in 2020 for saying anti-Semitism complaints in the party under his leadership were overstated. LBC weather: showers easing in Northern Ireland and Scotland tonight, damp and murky further south and east, and a low of 1 degree.
This is LBC.
.36 on LBC. Well, having restored some sort of order in the studio, let me reintroduce you to my panel. Alex Salmond is here, leader of the Alba Party. David Davis, former Brexit Secretary. Dr. Shola Mos-Shogbamimu, lawyer, political activist and author of the book This Is Why I Resist. And Noa Hoffman, political reporter for The Sun. Let's go to our next caller. It's Mark in Hitchin. Hello, Mark.
Yeah, hi, Ian. Good evening, panel. This afternoon, Rishi Sunak sat in front of the liaison committee, and in a direct question from Caroline Noakes, he said that under the illegal immigration bill, an Afghan female judge or MP who arrives in the UK on a small boat would be detained and removed to Rwanda. What do the panel think of that?
David Davis.
Well, it's well known I'm an opponent of the Rwanda policy. I don't like it for a variety of reasons. And this actually characterises quite well why, because we have some responsibilities arising from things we've done in the past, in this case, most notably Afghanistan. And my concern with the Rwanda policy, amongst others, is that somebody who we have a responsibility to, a judge, a teacher, a translator who worked for us or worked for a company working for us, would now be under threat from the Taliban, and we should give them proper protection. So there you understand why I don't like the Rwanda policy.
Wow, yeah. This might just be the one thing you and I may agree on.
Oh, my goodness.
That's not a bad thing.
Not
well
you.
said.
I've been here for quite a while.
It's an utter disgrace. I mean, I'm actually livid. My blood is boiling. How dare he? You're absolutely right. These are people that helped, Britain while we were there. And if anything, this just shows how people who do have talents, skill sets, who are coming because we've not given them a legal and safe route, who can actually contribute and add to our country, are being turned away for no good reason. It makes no sense.
Well,
that means that person is simply immediately being judged by the route that she had to take, fleeing persecution.
Will you allow me to play devil's advocate? Because what I'm about to say is not necessarily what I believe.
It's going to tick me off, isn't it?
No, it's not going to take you. Well, it may be. The fact is, I think everyone can agree that it is that this whole situation with the boats coming across the channel, it does have to stop. Now, that people can come up with all sorts of different ways of doing this. The government's view is that, well, this will be a deterrent to people coming across the channel, so therefore we will do it. Now, you can say, well, it's not a deterrent if only 200 people are going to go to Rwanda, but that is where they're standing. They say it's a safe country. The accommodation, according to the Home Secretary, is fantastic, and she'd quite like to live in it herself. So it can't be that bad.
This government is full of BS, and the Home Secretary, Shola Mos-Shogbamimu, is an incredibly dangerous woman who keeps spewing out more BS every single day. This so-called law is not going to be a deterrent for any reason or for anybody. What we should do is create proper legal safe routes. What we should do is to be hunting down the criminals. Those who are fleeing a persecution, they are not the criminals. They're not the ones doing something wrong. It's the human traffickers who are the criminals. Heck, it's this government that is turning us into a country that is totally inhumane. It's absolutely unacceptable.
Okay.
Let me tick you off.
You already ticked me off.
Yeah, let me do it now. The safe routes.
Oh, with Brexit,
safe routes, we agree, because Tim Lawton moved an amendment yesterday, and I supported him on the safe routes, and the government's now agreed to do something on that more quickly. In terms of the operational changes, whether it's arresting the traffickers, whether it's intervening in France, which is what he was seeing Macron about, you're right. This will be resolved not just by Rwanda, I don't think, principally, but by operational changes, proper control of what's going on.
Oh, you didn't tick me off there.
Really?
I'm
not trying hard.
Alex, just before I come to you, the Sun are reporting tonight, presumably you know this, Noah, that illegal migrants will be housed on giant barges to slash the $3.5 billion asylum hotel bill, if you want to...
Well, clearly they're all not going to be sent to Rwanda then if the giant barges are now being commissioned. If I could just correct David's correction of Shola, I mean, I think her point on safe routes was absolutely spot on, because I mean, what happens every time the Home Secretary gets asked it's not just the letting down people who've contributed to this country in terms of putting themselves at risk, who are being betrayed by the current policy. It's also just that straight question of what are the safe routes of immigration, and the Home Secretary is totally unable to answer the question. And until you start outlining that, then it's quite right to describe the current policy as inhumane, discriminatory, and it's also a dreadful indictment of an attitude to people who've put their lives on the line to help this country. But one thing I would say in David's favour, I mean, look, One thing I deeply regret.
Trends.
This will finish his long political career. About the trends in UK politics has been that David's style of conservatism, liberal conservatism, has been a decline.
Ever been described as a liberal before?
Well, I've got them twice. But firstly, his constituents now realise he's a conservative, and secondly, he might be tainted with liberalism as well. But that style of conservatism is not as prevalent as it once was, and I greatly regret that, because there are certain issues which people should be able to cooperate with across the political spectrum, and David has exemplified some of these human rights issues, and good luck to him, even though he's fighting a hard battle in his party.
Oh, that's a nice thing you said about him. That's nice.
Yeah, I'm done for now.
Let's all have a group hug. Noah.
So I think we all agree here that safe and legal routes are necessary, and that we should be protecting, people in Afghanistan who helped the British forces, who helped the United Kingdom, absolutely. But the fact of the matter is, small boat crossings, especially at the rising rate, that they are at the moment, are just not sustainable. We do not have the resources, whether that's in the NHS, whether that's in education, to accommodate all these people. And also, they are coming from France, which is by no means a country that is war-torn. So
have you watched the television this week?
Well, that is a good point. But it's just not sustainable. Something has to be done to stop it. And I think the illegal migration bill is a good start. But I do also agree with the others that there does need to be safe and legal routes to accompany the bill, so that, which they've said there will be Parliament will choose a number of spaces every year, and I think it's important they make sure that there are enough of those spaces to accommodate any person who helped the UK, whether that's in Afghanistan or elsewhere. But we cannot keep having boats.
But no, I'm sorry, but your reference to they are coming from France. What was that? Like, they're coming from France, they should stay there? Because France already takes a whole lot more than we do, right? And the reason why they're coming here, we all know, is because they have a connection to us, whether it's language or they have people here, family, and there's a connection there. There are two different things we're talking about here. There's the crossing people's lives. How can we protect them? How can we save them? And the other thing is to do with the operational processing of applications. That is where our government has failed totally in making sure that they're on top of things. And two things can be true. Let us reduce the number of boat crossings by giving them those safe and legal routes. Whether that means giving them the permission to be able to come without a visa, or granting them a visa, making it possible in other countries for their applications to be processed. We can think outside the box. This government is very good in using divisive rhetoric, in using coded words like Albania. The moment they mention Albania, people go, oh, they get hot under the collar and go, oh yeah, our country. This same country that during Brexit made so much noise about job security, we want to save our jobs. Okay, fine. You kicked everybody else out. Now that the jobs are there, you're not going out there to
exaggerate at all.
No, I'm not exaggerating. I'm just saying it as it is.
But let me pick up
very quickly.
Just pick on Albania. Put this point on Albania. We had 15,000 or so Albanians come last year. Why did they come here? Not because of prior contacts. It's because we allowed 55% to stay. That's the highest proportion in Europe, most of which are zero. Sweden, 0. It's not Italy.
Germany.
Germany, 0. Italy and France, the only two others that allowed any to stay, and we were way, way, way the highest. That's why they're coming here.
But it doesn't change the fact that they're being used, the word Albania, like any other word that this government uses, is being used as a divisive rhetoric to otherize people who are coming here.
No. Look, there's a very big distinction between the Afghans and others who are really fleeing death, frankly, and people come from Albania, which is a safe country. It's had fewer ECHR objections in the last 5 years than we have.
It doesn't mean that you and I should watch as the word Albania is turned into a dirty attack. No, but it is. Look, we know for a fact the way some people in the country think. You use coded words and immediately it's authorizing other people, it's dehumanizing them. So if there are issues around Albanians coming or how we process them, let's deal with that in a humane way.
If we're going to
not
solve this problem,
dehumanize them.
if we're going to solve this problem, we have to differentiate between people who come from safe countries and people who don't. That's the key. And I'm afraid Albania is not a coded word; it's the name of a country.
It's the name of the country.
No, we have to call it, draw it to a close. We have to draw it to a close.
It's not.
Yes, it is.
I now,
It's the name of the country.
It's not the name of the country.
No, I now hesitate to read out this Alexa message from Susan in London, who says, I listen to Cross Question every Monday, Tuesday and Wednesday. I love the way Iain handles his panels. If only he could head Parliament like he does Cross Question. He's suggesting that I should be Speaker.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, you do have to be an MP first, but thank you for the compliment. I think I've miserably failed in the last 2 minutes to live up to your words, haven't I? It's 8:47.
LBC.
I've got
10 to 9 on LBC. We have Alex Salmond, David Davis, Dr. Shola and Noa Hoffman with us. Let's go to our next question. It's from Martin in Wolverhampton. It's a text question. What do the panel think of Royal Mail bosses threatening to put the company into administration unless the striking workers end their industrial action? Shola.
How dare they? What nonsense. I think that they're utterly proving the point of the strikers. The best way to deal with a situation like this is not to make the workers feel even less than they already do by threatening to take their jobs away and putting the company into administration. Like, they're cutting their noses to spite their face. That makes no sense to me.
David?
One of the worst-run companies in Britain, I'm afraid, and this is why they got the strike. I mean, it includes things like surveillance, the concerns of the strikers, but of the workers. But the difficulty is, if they put it into administration, it'll never come out. I mean, the competition for post, they can't deliver first-class mail on time, and the competition from all sorts of other media of communication will be enormous. So it will be fatal if that happens.
The union, the CWU, think that basically the Royal Mail is trying to fatten, or I don't know what the opposite of fatten is in this sense, but fatten the company up so a private equity company can come in and buy it. And of course, if it went into administration, that would be job done, because then they could do, I suppose. That's the accusation that's being made. Do you think there's anything in that?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I don't know enough of the background to it. But if that's the case, then one of the things we should be looking at is preventing the Royal Mail bosses becoming millionaires off the back of it.
Alex?
Well, I mean, I had a quick look at the website today because I was interested in the story. And the Royal Mail website starts by saying we've been delivering letters for 500 years. That's the first thing it says. And, of course, the privatisation process was, 7 years ago now? So it's kind of a lesson here. Something runs for 500 years, for 5 centuries, and it gets privatised 7 years ago, and now it's threatened with administration. I think there's a moral tale there somewhere. And yes, of course, we're all, everybody does email, letters are noted, postcards, you don't have them so much. So even Christmas cards, you don't have them so much. But, the parcel deliveries are vastly increased because of online shopping. And there doesn't seem any inherent reason why you've been able to run a company for 500 years in one form or another, and then the last 7 years it gets to the point of the bosses threatening administration. There seems to be something very badly wrong, and of course, from my perspective, I think it's part and parcel of the privatisation process.
No, done by the Liberal Democrats, I should say. No, very briefly.
I would say it sounds like a bit of a slap in the face of the workers. They should do what a lot of businesses are doing in this cost of living crisis against this terrible inflation. Get around the table and negotiate. Treat your workers better, and then they won't come at you in this way.
Right, a final question. I think it's a really interesting one from James in Hitchin. James, do you fire away?
Good evening. In an age of artificial intelligence, how do we encourage human wisdom?
Deep.
Too deep. It's almost an idea.
Well, Shola, as you piped up, you can answer first then.
Because the first question I'll ask is, what is human wisdom? Human wisdom to me is a work in progress. We are still learning about things that we don't even know, and even the things we claim we know, we are basically still graduating from one level to another. I think in the age of AI, we are likely to be the knowledge that passes for human knowledge will end up being the knowledge of whoever is seen to be, the developed country, the first grade race, all of those kind of things that already cause a lot of problems with humanity today. So look, human wisdom is a work in progress. If AI can take our own experience of learning, unpicking our learning as we're learning, maybe that can work, but I don't know. Unless it's going to be a new age of Google, something out there that can transcend human intelligence and going, I know where you've been, Alex. I know where you've been, Noah. This is what your trajectory is. And this is...
Unless that happens. Can do that.
They don't know.
Unless we have wisdom that is like a godlike wisdom, I don't know. I don't know how we can encourage human wisdom except to say we need to be ready like children to learn, to absorb, to unpick, and when we fall, get up again.
Alex?
Well, my answer's not going to be nearly as profound as that
profound,
one. I went onto this Google artificial intelligence thing a few days ago because it said it could write speeches, and I thought to myself, I'll get some decent speeches, right? So I was so proud of myself. I inputted everything. It took me ages and ages and ages, and then triumphantly it recorded my, getting onto the app. And then it said I was on a waiting list. So I'm now on a waiting list for artificial intelligence. And when I get some, I'll let you know.
Sounds like the NHS.
It's run by Google, David. And I mean, if according to what the app says it can do, I could have speeches written about Scottish independence in the style of David Davis MP. Now, wouldn't that be something to...
God, wouldn't you lose my...
Well, I've just gone on to ChatGPT because I was going to ask it this question. It says, whoa there, you might need to wait a bit. We're very busy.
I think this is a really important question, and actually, funnily enough, the government published an AI white paper today, which I am yet to read, but I do love Department of Science, Technology and Innovation press releases, I will add. I think so the AI arms race has started. It's not going to stop. What that's going to do is change the way we think. I don't think it's going to stop it altogether, but it's going to bring up a whole new set of challenges, a whole new set of ethical dilemmas that will give humans something to think about, wisdom to consider, ideas to share. It will just look very different to the way we think and learn today, and that's something we're going to have to adapt to because, the way the economy works, these things make money, they make life easier, they increase productivity. So it's not going to stop. And it's challenging and it's scary, but it's something that we as a sort of human race need to get together and consider. And there is a lot of ethical questions that come with this. There's going to be questions about, unemployment. What do we do when machines take all our jobs? But I think there will always, maybe not always, this is debated among AI ethicists, be this difference between us and machines where we are sentient beings. And for now, they are not. And I think that's something we need to hold on to. And that's a quality that humans have that for now, at least, machines don't have, and that we will use to sort of mould them and develop them in the future.
Well, I was delighted to read today on Radio Today that my boss at Global Radio, James Rear, has been speaking at a conference today, and he doesn't think that AI can replace radio presenters. David Davis.
I'm sure we can find a way of proving him wrong. I said you wouldn't make the end of this program. Well, firstly, we should use AI in education to get youngsters to orient away from remembering everything and towards insight. I mean, that will be a big change. But also, we should get government ministers to understand it a bit better before they issue press releases. I mean, there was a press release, I think, yesterday or the day. I can't remember.
That would be a challenge.
Yeah, it would. Because they said AI is no longer just about Terminator. Well, it never was. Terminator was a fiction, not a documentary.
Right. Philip in Oxford, for our final fun text question, says, as the Scotland football team begins its campaign to qualify for the next European Championship, I'm reminded of the team's theme song during the run-up to Euro 2020, 70s disco hit Yes Sir, I Can Boogie by the Spanish duo Baccara. So, panel, what's your go-to song for when everything is going just perfectly? Shola. No, don't bang the desk against the microphone.
Rock you. That's my song.
Okay, David?
I will rock you.
We will rock you.
No,
Rule
I will
Britannia.
rock you.
Oh, my God.
That's the most Tory thing I've ever heard.
We've got high hopes. High hopes. Up to the sky hopes.
Right. And Noa?
I think my one's more will be more relatable to your friends at Capital than LBC listeners, possibly. But it's Savage by Beyonce and Megan Thee Stallion.
Oh, let's go, girl.
Yes.
Now we're talking.
I have heard of Beyonce, but I haven't heard of the song. I was going to try and get Yes Sir, I Can Boogie up on my phone to play through the microphone, but we'd probably have to pay royalties on it, so I've better not. It's been a very enjoyable hour. Thank you all very much. Alex, Noa, Shola and David. We will have another cross question for you this time tomorrow. In the next hour, David Jason, or I should say Sir David Jason, the 83-year-old actor, Del Boy, met his daughter, who he did not know anything about, 52 years after having a fling with her mother. Now, I'm going to ask you a question, which I'm slightly anxious about this hour, because I wonder what percentage of people listening have discovered that they've got a relative that they knew nothing about. Because if you have, I want to hear from you over the next 60 minutes. What happened? How much of a surprise was it? Did you develop a good relationship? Was it difficult? What were the barriers? 0345 6060 973 is the number to call here on LBC.
On your radio, on Global Player, And
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 9 o'clock, the terrorism threat level in Northern Ireland has risen from substantial to severe, meaning an attack is considered highly likely. The Northern Ireland Secretary, Chris Heaton-Harris, says the public should remain vigilant but not alarmed and continue to report any concerns to the police. LBC's Washington correspondent, Simon Marks, says the development will likely worry